Hey everyone, so it's like 1 a.m. right now. Just got back from the JUF dinner. But I was thinking about it and I said, I gotta get this on paper. I started writing down and I got to like 500 words of just things that I was doing as I was networking. And I just want to share them because I think they're really helpful if you're somebody who struggles on what you should do at networking events. I think these are just a couple of tactics. I don't think it's all inclusive, but it's definitely the things that just came off the top of my head of what I was doing, either consciously or subconsciously. So, first off, who am I looking for when I'm trying to network with people, especially at a big event where there's 3,000 people? There's a lot of opportunity to talk to different people. So, the first thing I do is I look for people who are walking alone or just walking around kind of aimlessly, looking around and trying to see if anybody will kind of interact with them. This is kind of an easy tell. Typically, I will avoid people who are on their phone unless I see that they're just on Twitter, kind of refreshing their feed, almost looking for something to help them escape from their boredom. So ideally, it's somebody who's walking around, either have a drink in their hand, or they have some, or they're just kind of looking around for people to meet. And then the second most optimal person to talk to, I think, would be somebody who's on their phone and pretty bored. If there's somebody who's kind of like writing an intense email or it looks like they're trying to concentrate, I would avoid that because you could basically be interrupting a huge email that they got to put out or a big text message that might be personal. So once you find somebody like that, I would say the first thing you should do when you're introducing each other is to pay attention to, at the bare minimum, their first name. The reason why that's important is that at the end of the day, there are other ways once you get their first name where you can go back and try and figure out who you were talking to so that you can either add them on LinkedIn later or try to look up their email to follow up with them if the conversation goes well. But you want to make sure to know their first name at the beginning and kind of repeat it to yourself in your head while you're listening to them, if you're able to do that, just so that you have a kind of a data point to go off on if you want to add them later. And I'll get into why that's important later on. So you'll see how that comes into play later. If you can get a last name, really important, really helpful if you're trying to add them later, because again, that's another way for you to just kind of limit the amount of search that you have to do to find them again and add them to your LinkedIn or follow up. The second thing that I'll do after introducing myself and kind of saying how are you and kind of exchanging pleasantries is just ask about what they do on a day-to-day basis. The reason why I say ask what they want to do on a day-to-day basis instead of what do you do for work or what do you do, where do you work, is because you want to avoid asking a question where they could potentially feel out of place already if they're not currently employed, if they're between jobs, if they're kind of networking right now to look for a new job. You don't put the pressure on them to try and come up with an excuse as to why they're not working at a company right now. So I think it's an important distinction and it's an important tactic to kind of make sure that you're giving them the opportunity to say what they do on a day-to-day basis, and it doesn't necessarily have to be their work right now. They might be working on their side project or working on their side hustle. If they do answer with a company, again, remember that company. So right now, all we have to do in our kind of memory bank is we just want to know their first name, which you've repeated to yourself twice, and then their company, which I think should be a little bit easier to recognize because it's a little bit more distinct. But if you don't know what that company is, maybe ask them to repeat it. It might help for you to remember later on. If you didn't get a first name from the earlier introduction, or if you're forgetting it in your head, a good thing to do is maybe try and ask them where they went to school. And then the reason for that is that now you have either where they work or what they do on a day-to-day basis, what their school is. And then the third thing is then ask them to get a more specific description, so you can ask them if they do tell you what they do on a day-to-day basis, ask them to elaborate on what the actual function of that is. And once you get a better idea of what they're actually working on a day-to-day basis, again, it makes it easier to try and find them later on. And then all of that kind of gets thrown out the window if they have a business card, right? So if they do end up having a business card at the end, it's much easier to add them or follow up with them later because you have all that information right there. If you don't, now that you've started to ask that stuff in the beginning, you have their first name, ideally, their company, the school they went to, and the day-to-day activity or their role, which you can then literally type into LinkedIn. So you have all these data points that you can go back later and add them on LinkedIn. The reason why that's important is that after you finish up, well, I'll get to that in a second, but you should, at the same time, while you want to know what questions to ask and kind of get more information so that you know what you can follow up with them on later, I think it's also important to have your fallback plan, kind of your plan B, in case you start running out of things to talk about, or if you see the conversation is dying down. And one of the things I'll do is I'll just ask them, what brought you to the event today? So I'll literally ask them, how'd you find out about the event? Typically, they'll talk about how their company sponsored it. That's the reason why I went to the dinner tonight. They'll say that they were just going to see how the event was and what it was like, or they've never been to the event and were really interested when they first heard about it. All three of those answers can go into different conversations that then kind of open up and create a little bit more of a relaxed state between you two, and also just continue the rapport between you two. I think on top of being able to ask questions that give you information and then also advance the conversation, you should also know what you do. So even if it's nothing at all, you should at least know. So in the case that you know what you do, I would say that be able to say it within 15 to 20 seconds. So if somebody asks me, if I tell them that I work in forensic accounting and I work in forensic insurance and recovery services, right? They're gonna be like, what is that? I'll literally tell them, we help people get back on their feet when disaster strikes. So if a company like a manufacturing company or a hotel has a flood or the manufacturing plant halts, we come in and assess how much revenue they lost. How much did their business get impacted as a result of that interruption in their regular course of business? We come in and we measure that and make sure they're getting that money from the insurance company, or do our best to do it within the four corners of the policy, as my managing director likes to put it. So that's if you know what you do. If you don't know what you do, or you're not currently doing anything right now, you're a student, you aren't working in the field yet, or you've only really had one internship under your belt, be candid. Just be humble and say, I'm new to the industry. I really just want to meet people within it and try to understand what people are doing within this industry so I can have a better idea of what I might want to go into. The reason why that's so amazing is that it's so attractive to people when you come in and you're just really just authentic. You're just, you know what, I really don't know what I want to do yet, but I want to learn. And in order for me to learn, I need to meet people, great people like you, right? People will really appreciate that, and the fact that you're not coming in there and trying to sell them or trying to get them on you being a big shot when you're really just learning, and everybody knows that. So again, circling back, when you're ending that chat, again, ideally a business card, but if you can't get a business card, just try to ask them if they can, if you're really unsure about being able to find them afterwards, so like a first name, so even with a first name, a company name, the school, or their day-to-day activity, or if you feel like you forgot one of those things, you can even say, I know you don't have a business card, but I'd really like to follow up and learn and just continue the conversation and check in to see how things are going in a month or two. That alone will probably have them pull out their own notebook or pull out a piece of paper or rip off something or just tell you their email so that you can write on your phone. So just as long as you're trying to be as, open to learning and finding out more about them and continuing that relationship, they're typically going to be pretty receptive to that. Let's see. Oh, and then if you do find them on LinkedIn, this is really important and something that people screw up so much. You need to personalize your note. What do I mean by that? Most people, when they go into LinkedIn, they've met someone, they find them on LinkedIn, then they just click the connect button or they click the check mark to add them. The problem with that is that person has no context for why you're inviting them. Because think, if you're both at a networking event and you both are going out and trying to meet a ton of people, that person might not remember ever either meeting you or what you talked about, or if you even exist, if you're not a fake account. And so it's a big tactic to be able to actually put a personalized note about what you two actually talked about. If you're on your phone, it's typically going to be you going to the more icon. So there's a more icon. So there's like a connect icon. There's a message that I think will be an in-mail. You won't really be able to do it. And then there's a more button. And so when you tap that more button, it's going to give you options. And you're going to go to the second one from the bottom, I believe, and you're going to put in, and you're going to tap personalize invite. And then from there, you're going to talk about exactly what you discussed in that conversation with that person. If you're on a computer or laptop, you're going to go to the connect button, click on it, and then there's going to be an option to add note. Do not hit the send now. That's what a lot of people do, and it's the wrong move. You should add note Or if the connect option isn't there, you can go to the more, you can click the more option on that person's profile, and then again, it'll have a connect option for you to click on, and then from there you can click the add a note. And I think it's just important to do just a sentence or two about what you discussed, and that you're looking forward to staying connected or checking back within a month or two, or whatever it might, however amount of time you two in the conversation discussed checking in or reaching back out. All of these tips are the types of things that I do no matter what, every single networking event I'm at. It's just the core principle. There's other tactics that I look forward to adding and kind of doing more videos on, but at the bare bones, bare minimum foundational principles of what I do at a networking event, these kind of encompass, I would say, about like 80 to 85% of it, with the other things being little nuances that can kind of improve, but not necessarily have as drastic results as the things that I laid out in this video. So I hope that was helpful. I think that kind of does it within a kind of 10-minute window, giving you kind of the most valuable tactics that I use when I'm going into any networking event.